On this episode of the podcast, I have with me Nirman Dave. He is the co-founder and CEO at Zams. We're going to be talking about a little bit of his journey, actually, and how he started the company during the pandemic. Obviously, the market has changed in relation to AI, and we're going to talk to him how some of those market changes have come to be and extra competition, as well as talk about how he focused on differentiating as there's more entrants within the space. A couple of things we'll try to cover in there with Nirman, but thanks for taking the time.
Yeah, excited to be here.
Absolutely. All right, before we start, tell us what Zams does.
So Zams is a UI first platform that allows anyone to build their own AI agents and predictive models very seamlessly. And it's really enforced and built for the enterprise. So you can index like billion rows of database data, integrate with 100,000 different files, and really kind of build out these agents that automatically perform tasks and get you outcomes that you need.
Awesome, man. Awesome. Hey, by the way, Zams is a unique name out of curiosity. How do you come up with that?
Yeah. ZAMS actually stands for the word zero age main sequence. That's the astrophysics term that's used to define when a star is born, when a star kind of illuminates itself and becomes stable. Like that's the moment we call zero age main sequence. What we saw is that a lot of customers that we work with, a lot of enterprises that have never built AI before, that have never kind of used data in a meaningful way before, when they work with us, when they end up building out AI agents on the Zams platform, they actually fundamentally change their business decisions, right? It's not just like a small shift here and there, but it's a whole fundamental change around the strategy of the business, around the outcomes that they do. And this kind of is, quote unquote, quoting some of our customers, an illuminating moment for them. That's where really this name ties into what we do.
All right, very cool. Love it. Okay, so obviously the company was started a couple of years back during the pandemic. And we're not going to talk about the pandemic, but obviously you started at a time when there was not a lot of hope at the end of the tunnel for a lot of people, right? So obviously the thought to start a business during the pandemic, did you even think about that twice, or was it a question of I have an idea, I'm going to go forward? I mean, did that even factor in your decision at the time?
So when we started the business, we were still in college. We just wanted to build out something cool. And at the time, we built this thing called automated hyperparameter tuning technology, right? Formerly known as AutoML, right? And you go to anyone, you can tell them about this. They'd be like, "What is this? I don't get it. Like, how is this AI? What does this do?" People didn't really used to get it. Market has changed a lot. I think a lot of education has come into the market. People understand what AI agents can do. We've really seen, a lot of shift from like companies like ChatGPT and Claude bringing a different wave of possibilities. And so when we started, it was a fun kind of project that we wanted to bring to the market. And I think today, some of the top enterprises in the world really kind of work with us, really kind of like trust us because we've been around. We've really seen how different shifts in AI have really augmented to different industries and workflows. And it's actually given us a lot more edge moving forward because we truly at the core understand how AI wants to, or how enterprises are using AI agents, and it can help them accelerate. So that's kind of been the benefit of being around for a bit and really seeing the market. But when we started, it was all fun and games. And very quickly now we've become a primary choice for a lot of large enterprise businesses.
Absolutely. I guess in the last 2 years, 3 years maybe, we've just seen a massive shift in the number of companies that want to be startup. We can even just talk about startups. We need to talk about other enterprises. Just startups. How many AI native, AI first products are coming to the market?
Yeah.
I guess when you were to think about starting, 5, 6 years ago versus now, just the environment in which you have to kind of, operate in, what are some of the things that have changed for you?
Yeah, I think every time there's a major shift in the industry, we see a bunch of startups racing to kind of build something that accommodates for that shift, right? So back in the day when AutoML and automated machine learning was very critical, we saw tons of startups kind of building these like fun, hacky tools, right? And very quickly we learned that what enterprises really want is not a fun, hacky tool, but something that they can trust, something that can really guide them in building the type of models that they do. And really, we centered our entire platform around that. Today, we're seeing a different wave, which is the language model wave, right? And every startup in the world is really racing to build out a fun language model hacky tool. That's why we see tons and tons of APIs, tons and tons of SDKs, right? We see a lot of that in the market today. And what really is important is knowing what the customers truly want and driving the product around it. And what we've seen is that, when you do that, you kind of become a staple for the customer. You become a part of their workflow, you become a part of their product, and it's very hard to move away from it, right? And so I try, just from a founder perspective, like I try to focus more on product market fit, which is, are we building the right product for the type of customers that we want? And are those customers really, truly happy with what we're building, as opposed to market competition kill? Because we see a lot of startups come and go and kind of, focus on the trends. But for us, it's been a very natural progression. When we started, we were building predictive AI models that, customers could use to predict outcomes. And then the next step from there was, oh, how do I automate actions on these outcomes, right? And so we said, hey, why don't you integrate to Salesforce and HubSpot and a bunch of different technologies, so all the predictions can go to these tools. And then our customers said, well, this is great. How do I really ask follow-up questions to this model? How do I say, why are you making this prediction, right? What's kind of your judgment call behind this? And that kind of led to the birth of what we call internally as knowledge AI, which is AI agents that can answer questions specific to your data, specific to the models that you're building. And then next step immediately after that was, our customers said, why don't you integrate this in Apollo and a bunch of these other tools that we're using? And so that led to a different wave of process AI, right? So for us, it was a very natural progression to be where we're at and kind of have these AI agents be a part of customers. In fact, we've been doing that even before there were terms like AI agents. But what we see is building with a focus of customer in mind as opposed to the competitor is really kind of what helps. And that's how we focused on it.
Absolutely. Have you noticed? I know obviously we talk about agents now. 2 years ago, we didn't talk about agents. I'm sure as you were developing the product, maybe the term agents wasn't in your vocabulary because it wasn't common. Maybe it was. I don't know. You can tell us. But I guess as the AI ecosystem is changing, it is very quick. We have gone through renaming different parts of the product ecosystem. We are talking about agents to make it more understanding to the end user, to the enterprise. When you're looking at something like that, and obviously as a founder, you have to not only build your product, make sure it's evolving, but you also have to actually make sure that it's staying within the conversation of what people are comfortable with. I mean, talk to us a little bit about that, because you got to be on the ball to not miss that zig right there.
Right. I think ultimately the core focus for us has always been and will always be what our customers care about, what they think, right? And there might be a world out there, there might be a community out there that's talking about AI agents or a bunch of different fun things. But if our customers aren't there, we don't really care, right? We want to be where our customers want to be at. And so that's kind of what our typical focus is overall. And ultimately what I've come to realize is, businesses at the end of the day ultimately want three things, right? One is either to make money, or save time, one of those. And you can have different terms and you can have different vocabularies, which we've seen kind of move very fluidly across the space. But ultimately, how is it really tying to their business? I'll give you an example. We work with a company that's a manufacturing company based out of Los Angeles, very traditional manufacturing, right? They have Oracle systems as their databases, right? And they actually came to us. They said, hey, I've heard about a lot of things about like these AI agents. I can build these chatbots and ask questions to my data. Can I set that up on Zams? And they started with that use case. They set it up on Zams, but very quickly they realized, oh, why don't I also automate some of these invoice processing? Because again, they're manufacturers. So they have all these suppliers sending them small different nuts and bolts and different parts to their facilities, and they have to manage the invoices to these suppliers. They have dedicated people that used to actually go through an invoice, decide if they want to negotiate with the vendor or not, or just pay it out, right? And that was a very tedious task. So they realized that, hey, AI isn't just a chatbot. I could actually use it for my processes. And they said, why don't we integrate these AI models into our process? So they created this invoice processing model, fairly straightforward, where they said, look at this invoice, and if there's room to negotiate, go out and negotiate with the vendor yourself. And today, by doing that, they were able to repurpose some of the team that was just doing this like manual repetitive task to something more exciting in the team. And at the same time, they have these agents now that perform tasks for them, right? So our focus is always about where do we ensure that our customers are, and how do we help our customers save time, save money or make money. And in this case, these guys are saving about 20 hours a day just going through all these invoices, which an agent does now, right? So this is very interesting for me personally, because what happens is that it doesn't only do an interesting small shift in their business, but now their entire fundamentals of the business have shifted. They're saying, how do I repurpose this team to focus on more important CFO tasks than having these other things? And they're saying, well, what do I do next? How do I ensure that the agent is working well? Just like if I had a person that was doing this, I would, trust him or her to do the job well. How do I ensure that the agent is performing well, right? And so now they're focused on things like, let me build out a quick kind of evaluation metric, right? So they essentially have the spreadsheet and they're evaluating and they're saying, oh, this was a good negotiation, we should have gone for this, or reaching out to this vendor was kind of useless, and they're kind of giving that feedback as well, right? So the whole fundamental process around how they could use AI has shifted. And I think that's a very interesting thing. So our focus tends to be more around how do we get these outcomes, regardless of what the terms are. We can call it agents, we can call it this, we can call it that, but how is it really tying to that business is ultimately what's really important. And that's what we've focused on.
Absolutely. I guess just with the sheer number of competitors within the space, I mean, you have to differentiate your product. Obviously, it sounds like you're very passionate. Make sure you're supporting your customers, goals and objectives with the product. But as there are just so many AI startups in the market,
Right.
obviously you have to differentiate against the ones that are closer to you. It's a little bit different than it was maybe when you first started out several years ago. How do you work to differentiate against other entrants into this market now?
So I'll tell you what we're seeing and where we're headed as a company, right? So
Hmm.
one of the most interesting things that we're seeing right now is that there's so many companies out there helping you build out these AI agents, right? There are these APIs that you can call, there are these SDKs you can use, right? There are these automated operators that you can kind of set things up on as well. So what I truly believe is seeing the space where it's at and seeing where our customers are at, right? Where I see the gap is that AI needs a user interface, right? It's in its browser moment. So back in the day, we had internet that used to exist for a while, but it wasn't until the web browsers came along, provided a very seamless UI that became accessible to everyone. And so we see a world where AI needs a UI, a user interface, an operating system that really allows these manufacturing companies that's in LA. This guy's never interacted with databases before, but now he's in it day in and day out. He's looking at these agents because he has that user interface. And so when we think about competition, we're not necessarily saying, oh, let's go out and build our own LLM. We're not necessarily saying, oh, let's go out and build our own kind of monitoring frameworks and which a lot of these companies and tools are doing really, really well. But we're saying, how do we ensure that there's a web browser for AI, that there's a UI that really accelerates the adoption of AI across these companies that nobody really thinks about: manufacturing, logistics, finance, right? Like, so these are the areas where we're doubling down on. And we see a world where what we're building is not necessarily an API or an SDK that does one or two things here and there, and then you have to kind of club it together with five other APIs. But what we're really building is that web browser for the rest of the AI world, and that allows it to become more unlocked for the rest of the ecosystem.
I guess when you're looking at, obviously you've mentioned the benefits of the product and how customers are progressing and using it further, and obviously helping with some of that feedback and baking it into innovation of what Zams is doing. It seems like it's a pretty dynamic cycle. Things are happening very quickly, even as you kind of mentioned the company's evolution to this point. When you look at your roadmap and you kind of are trying to make sure you have enough flexibility within that roadmap, is there, I guess, how do you view that? Is there a thing of being too flexible within the market you're in?
Great question. I think personally, as an individual who's been a data scientist before, I get excited about a lot of things that I see in the space, right? But ultimately, when it comes to the product, we have to be extraordinarily intentional about what we're building, because at the end of the day, we are a company that needs focus. We don't have an army of 1,000 engineers and everyone can build out a single feature and we're good to go. But we want to make sure that whatever we build it with a lot of craftsmanship, with a lot of intricateness to it. And to do that really well, we need to focus on what we need to build. And we're very intentional about the features that we build out. So when it comes to building out product roadmaps, we're in it every day, right? Like we're building out these roadmaps every single day. We're saying, do we absolutely need this? Do our customers care? So on and so forth. Like an example is like the same logistics company that I gave you an example of. This company used to evaluate the model by having a little spreadsheet. And they used to manually test things on the spreadsheet, upload files, and check if it's giving you the right results. They say, okay, cool, this model is performing well, right? Very recently, we started to kind of incorporate some of the most important frameworks in testing these models. So we now have things like, precision, recall, top K, faithfulness score, BLU scores, right? So we have all of these things built into the platform. So the customer gets a very quick visibility into it. Now, the question is, did these scores and these like mechanisms to evaluate AI agents exist before we built in? Of course, right? They were there for a bit. They're, evolving as more and more people are using them. But ultimately, it was the intentional decision to say, this is the specific thing we're going to show, and this is how we're going to show it because our customers want it. So even though there's so much in the space, our goal is not just to, quote unquote, build everything and just have a dump of everything that's there. But our goal is to really ensure that we're very, very intentional about what we're building. And even if it's cool, but it's not relevant for our users, for the enterprise, we put a stone on our heart and say, we're not going to build it, right? And that's how we really think about product.
Interesting. You started in the pandemic, and within that time frame, obviously things were difficult. We saw zero rates for a while, which helped a lot of startups. And now we've kind of shifted to an environment where rates are high. Money just isn't as readily available, as cheap as it was. It's interesting because it represents a different challenge as opposed to the pandemic. When you're looking at just comparing the two, because obviously being a startup owner and having that perspective of dealing with two different economic climates, how do you compare the two? I guess, is there, and we don't need to necessarily know, where funding is at, but just in terms of the climate of what funding seems like, that'd be great to kind of hear your insights.
So as a company, as of today, we've raised a little over $10 million across different rounds that we've done. One of the rounds was in pandemic, right? Wasn't during that time. And what I've come to realize personally is that ultimately what matters when it comes to investors and markets is a business that shows growth and sustainability. Right? Sustainability is significantly more important, right? Like you can have a lot of growth today because a lot of people have experiment budgets and they just want to experiment and try your tool, and you feel like, oh shoot, I went from 0 to XYZ million ARR and this is great, right? Next thing you know, people are churning, people are adjusting their budgets, they realize an experiment doesn't work, right? So it's very important for us that the revenue that we bring on board is a sustainable revenue that customers really love and can really take those AI agents and take those models and make them a part of their workflow. And so as a founder, when you start to focus on these fundamentals, right? When you start to focus on your revenue, net retention rate, and really kind of hone in those fundamentals, I have personally seen that investment interest kind of really follows that. So when we started early on, right, just in college and kind of graduating, we said, let's build this tool. At that time, it was very exciting to say, oh, I want to get in front of so many investors and raise some round and raise some funding. And we should go and pitch to these investors. And I have a really, really interesting story to share. We went to one of the investors here in Palo Alto, and right after that, we were supposed to be meeting with one really kind of well-known investor in the space, right? So we go to this investor and we pitch them our product and we say, look, you can build AI models that predict outcomes for you. And this investor says, so tomorrow, if I have a tsunami and it wipes out a bunch of people, will it register as a predicted customer churn? And we said, no, of course not. Like, we're not God. We can't predict factors like that. But if you have historical data about how your customers are behaving, we can really use that and predict that, right? And so this person really was very persuasive. Like, investors are very persuasive at times. So they told us to incorporate some external features where we can have these externalities baked into the predictions. Right? We got very excited about that. We didn't know we wanted to do that. None of our customers had ever asked for that. But we went to the next investor, and when the next investor said, what's in a roadmap, we said, you know what, let's try to impress this investor. Right? And just to impress the investor, we said, oh, you can, have external factors being baked into the predictions. Terrible idea. Terrible idea. Because ultimately, investors don't drive the product. The market, the customers really drive the product. And what I learned that day was that pleasing investors and doing things that could look good for investable purposes wasn't the best move. In fact, the best move was to look inwards and look at your customers and really try to understand what do they care about, right? And how do you ensure that they have a great experience and driving that? And every moment we've started to focus on the customers, we've ended up either increasing revenue, increasing kind of retention. We've ended up building these extraordinary product experiences that investors has flocked to. In fact, the next round that we did after all of this fun little shenanigan was an investor that actually tried our product, and his wife was a research student, a PhD research student, who absolutely loved our product because she had tried the free trial and things like that. And he came to us and said, I want to invest in you guys. And at the time, we weren't raising. So we said, unfortunately, we're not raising. How about we connect later? And this guy was like, I want to invest, and this is the best product I've seen. So when you really focus on customers and the product, you have investment interest come to you, is what I've personally learned from my experience. And that's what we continue to double down on. So the markets can be different, the markets can be challenging, but at the end of the day, if you're fundamentally really solid in your business, that's really what matters.
I love that. I think that is a fantastic view, and I I actually think a lot of founders should embrace it. I think a lot of founders do embrace it. I think it is tricky because as you do get close to fundraising, there is a little bit of maybe propensity to want to, dazzle and make sure that you've captured attention. I think that could be distracting. So it sounds great that you guys are laser focused.
I have a feeling about that, which is, look, these investors are really smart, right? Like they know founders when there's all kind of glitz and glamour and dazzle, and they know founders when there's serious business growth, right? And so we've also I think one of the things that we have a fun experience on is I'll probably have a story for everything that we've gone through because we made a lot of mistakes, right? We've really glamorized our pitch to investors, and while we felt like we were like killing it, right, the investors were kind of seeing straight through, and they were like, oh, so you have 3 customers and 1 product, right? Where are you going with this, right? So at the time when you do those mistakes, you learn from it. And I think one of my biggest learning has been, it's fun to have glitz and glamour, but ultimately investors see these startups day in and day out, and what they really care about is startups that have their fundamentals strong and have their vision clear, because that's really what drives things, right? Like I think the world isn't in scarcity of glitz and dazzle, but the world is in scarcity of clear fundamental vision that people can really drive through. And I think that's what a founder's job is to bring.
Fantastic. Final question for you, because I'm just kind of curious, and I agree with you. I think investors are smart, and if you cater to every investor, it's going to be really hard. When it comes to your customers, obviously you mentioned you're listening to your customers, you're taking their feedback in. You want obviously to be in service of the customer. There's also a danger for a founder that listens too closely to every customer's request, every customer's requirement. All of a sudden, they're building in features that are very custom to one, not really usable across. I guess as you kind of mentioned, contrasting, not catering to every investor, there is a danger of catering too much to customers, but you have to. I think it's a bit of an art. How do you approach that?
It's definitely an art. So I'll give you an example of a story that I had personally experienced when we were working with customers, and this was a couple of years ago. Um, one of the customers, one of our core product features is that it builds these AI models and AI agents in less than a minute. It indexes a bunch of different files in less than a minute. It tunes the hyperparameters if you're building a traditional model in a couple of minutes. It's the fastest tool in the market today. And so that's one of our core kind of product features. So we were testing it with one of our customers at the time. And for some reason, and this was early on in our early days, the customer said, you know what, this is a great model, it has great accuracy, everything looks really cool, but somehow I just don't trust it. And we said, why don't you trust it? Like, the accuracy is great. You tested the model, like, just go ahead and deploy it in the real world and you will see how it performs. Like, why do you not trust it? And he's like, you know what? Let me review it with my team and get back. A couple of days later, he gets back and he's like, I don't know if I really trust it. I can't really point my finger to it. We talked to 10 different customers at the time. And most often, all of them had a little bit of hesitation about taking that model to production. And they were like, I just don't know if I trust it. And at that time, we asked our customers, what would you say we could do to make it trusted? They said, why don't you have these evaluation metrics and have these charts and visualizations so we can really trust it? We built those out. It took us a couple of months, built that out, we went back to them, and somehow they were still not trusting the results of the model, right? And at that point, until that point, we were just blindly following what the customers said they wanted. And at that point, we paused and we said, well, let's think about why they don't trust it, right? And we came to realize from seeing their behaviors across these recorded calls and things like that was because we're the fastest tool in the market. And at the time, there was nothing as kind of fast. They had never seen something like that before. And so when they would click a button and would instantaneously take their billion rows of data and build a model, they'd be like, there's something wrong with this. Like, this can't be true. This is too fast, for it to function like that. And so we said, you know what, let's do a fun little thing. Let's just add a 30-second delay and a loading bar that just moves really slowly across the screen. And then it shows them the model, right? And we went back to the same customers. And what we started to hear from them, that they're like, you know what? Yeah, it seems a little bit more nuanced. Did you add a new algorithm? Did you change this? Did you change that? And we would just say yes to everything. But ultimately, what we had done at the time was we just added that little delay, right? So when you think about something like this, it's the customer is never going to tell you things, but you get to learn from it. And there's a little bit of fine balance in how you do it. I don't know if there's a recipe for that, but I think that really intently listening and really giving a damn about they don't trust it. Like I had nights where I couldn't sleep because I was thinking about them not trusting it, right? So really caring about it. I think that's what drives the prioritization on the product.
Fantastic, man. I love the views. I appreciate you coming on and sharing with us. If somebody wants to continue the conversation, pick your brain a little bit more on something you've mentioned here, what is a good way of getting in touch with you?
Send me a LinkedIn message. I'm on LinkedIn. Email me, nirman@zams.com. I'm very accessible, so reach out. I'd love to talk.
Okay, awesome. We'll put that in the show notes. And again, thanks for coming on. Thanks for sharing.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. That's it for this episode. Be back again. Different guest, different topic. Until then, two things. One, I think Nirman kind of walked us through a lot of what they're doing, obviously, at Zams, but he also talked about starting in the pandemic. He talked about different levels of competition he's dealing with, differentiating, catering to VCs or not catering to VCs, and as well customers. And that's all seems like a lot of art. And obviously, he's got some great insights. So share this episode with somebody else who might benefit from it. Also, like, subscribe, comment. Let me know how the show's going for you. I'd appreciate that. Until next time, thank you and goodbye.